I just want to do God's will.
The kind of revolution that the world needs is a Christian revolution.
If you want a miracle, you've got to expect it to happen.
You are the recipients of God's grace and God's blessings, and you rejoice in that reality.
Welcome to Life Today Live. We're going to talk about education and where your kids should or should not be. And this has really become a thing. And, COVID exposed a lot of curriculum that parents suddenly found out about. And the way the public schools are going, I grew up in public school, finished out in a private school last couple of years of high school, but, elementary, middle school, and into high school, public school. All my kids went to public school all of their lives. I'm not sure that's a great idea. And now, these days, it's sounding like a really bad idea in a lot of public schools and in a lot of places that used to be considered safe, like where I live in Texas, where you think, public schools are good there. Crazy stuff going on. The homeschoolers I used to make fun of, looking like the smart ones these days. What has happened? Well, my guest today calls what has happened a parent revolution. And in fact, that's the name of a book that is out now. It's called The Parent Revolution, written by Dr. Corey DeAngelis. He is the executive director at the Educational Freedom Institute, and he's an adjunct scholar at the Cato Institute and the Reason Foundation and the Liberty Justice. He does a lot. He knows what he's talking about, and he's here to talk to you today about the system under which a lot of kids are not being educated but indoctrinated. Corey, good to see you. Great to have you on Life Today Live.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
So, I kind of gave people some of the credentials and stuff, but before we get into some of the details of the school system and the situation, what exactly do you do kind of on a regular basis? What's your goal?
Yeah, I fight to fund students, not systems. The money meant for educating your child should follow you to the school that works best. If that's the public school, fine. If you like your public school, you can keep your public school, but for real this time, unlike with your doctor. But if not, that money meant for your kid should follow you to a school that aligns with your values. It could be a private school, charter school, or a home-based education option. And the good news is we're winning on this issue. We're winning so much, I'm almost getting tired of winning. We're not done yet. We had to get California and New York to come along at some point too. But 12 states in the past 3 years alone have gone all in on school choice, passing Milton Friedman's vision of universal school choice, no more picking winners and losers. All families, regardless of income, background, or zip code in those states like Arizona, Florida, and otherwise, can now take their kids' education dollars to the education provider of their choosing. So it's been glorious, and it's the union's own fault. In fact, I dedicated my book, The Parent Revolution, to Randy Weingarten and the teachers for overplaying their hand and inadvertently doing more to advance school choice and homeschooling than anyone could have ever imagined.
Okay, so now you just dropped a name that a lot of people won't recognize. I know she is. What has gone on in the schools that you've documented, that you've followed, that maybe not everybody knows, that has been so detrimental to kids? And a lot of it is being pushed by Randy Weingarten, so I get that. Give people an idea of why this needs to happen and needs to happen now.
Well, they're government-run failure factories that indoctrinate kids, but they also just fail academically. You look in Baltimore public schools, 40% of their high schools have 0% proficiency in math, not a single kid proficient in math. You look at Chicago and in Illinois, they have over 60 government-run schools with 0% proficiency in math. But it's worse than that. We spend tons of money. In Chicago, we spend over $30,000 a kid. And nationwide, we've pumped more money into the system than we know what to do with. We spend about $20,000 a kid now. That number has increased by about 170% after adjusting for inflation since 1970. Have the outcomes gotten 170% better? No, they've gotten worse because it's a one-size-fits-all monopoly that by definition is never going to meet the needs of individual families. And through Zoom school, when families saw the schools were closed, through remote learning, which, let's be real, we should have just called it remotely learning. There wasn't a lot of learning going on. Families got to see what was going on in the classroom, and they were focused more on the LGBTs than the ABCs. They were focused more on indoctrination than education. Yeah. And look, Vodi Bakum said it best. We cannot continue to send our children to Caesar for their education and be surprised when they come home as Romans. Well, good news is parents aren't surprised anymore. They're pissed off. They're pushing back. They're going to the school board meetings and they're having their mics cut off. They're getting labeled as domestic terrorists. But parents have continued to fight back despite the opposition, and they've become a political juggernaut to be reckoned with. So we're winning this war that the unions have waged on us for far too long.
Yeah, they have. And the reality is, my wife is really nice. Most mothers are very nice, people. You mess with their kids, whoo, buddy, it changes real fast. And I think, was it really COVID that woke a lot of people up? I don't think. I had no idea what was going on. Because here's the thing: you say Baltimore, you say Chicago. I don't live there. Yep. I don't live in a big interstate. I know that those. I'm in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I kind of figure that the schools aren't very good in South Dallas. Unfortunately, it's the poor area, predominantly African American, and so it started hitting. I don't know if you heard of the Keller Public Schools. My kids all went to Keller Public Schools. Southlake. These are affluent areas. And you would think fairly conservative areas. Then you find out what's in the libraries and what they're teaching. Yep. Is it just, are parents waking up because of COVID or because of what we're seeing? Or like you say, they just overplayed their hand and they're brazen about it?
Yeah, I think they've been so drunk on power for so long, they don't know how to backtrack. They haven't been able to backpedal, and that's been to their own detriment on the union side. But it's also true that when the schools closed, some families looked over their kids' shoulder during Zoom school and saw the teachers were focused on politically divisive topics. They were injecting critical race theory, Marxist ideology, dividing children based on immutable characteristics. But also through public records requests and social media, families have been able to mobilize, push back, and put a spotlight, which is the best disinfectant usually. But when it comes to the government school system, they double down on their anti-parent rhetoric, and they have gotten into it to try to control the minds of other people's children. And parents aren't having that. You don't come after the mama bears and the papa bears cubs and expect them not to fight back.
Yeah. Okay. Now that is crazy to me, that the way, especially like in the leadership, they have doubled down and painted parents as literally terrorists, domestic terrorists. Where does that even come from? That mentality.
It's a communist ideology. We saw this with Virginia's governor's race in 2021. Terry McAuliffe, he was the former governor. A lot of people thought he was going to win. He was up in the polls, but in the final debate, he said, quote, "I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach." And Glenn Youngkin, the Republican, won in a state that went 10 points to Biden, apparently, the year before. Glenn Youngkin, the Republican, won on education of all things by 6 points with education voters, the number 2 issue in that election. And you also had Joe Biden, who did horribly at his debate. I mean, they're trying to search for his replacement. I don't think he was ever running the country to begin with. Joe Biden's a hypocrite on school choice. He went to private school, sent his kids to private school, and then tries to pull up the ladder from behind himself and fights against school choice for others. But he also tweeted out that there's no such things as other people's kids. He says that they're society's kids. It's a communist ideology. They think that they own your kids. And this is why the parent revolution is so important, that even if you're homeschooling your own kids or your kids are out of school by now, well, guess what? The government school system has been infiltrated by radical leftists who are using the school system to control the minds of other people's children for 13 years of their lives, for 7 hours a day. You can't fight against that rot without striking at the root. And look, even if you care about tax policy or other areas of life, those people going through that system, 50 million kids a day, they're going to learn to believe that big government's the solution to all their problems. They're going to vote to raise your taxes in the future. And that's why we need to have the money follow the child, so that parents could incentivize the public schools to focus more on the basics, on math, reading, and writing, as opposed to all these divisive topics that, it's going to move us towards socialism if we don't do something about it now. And thankfully, the parents are doing something about it now.
Okay, so you've said a couple of times that the money needs to follow the child. And here's, I think, the question a lot of people have is, there is a socialistic aspect, and we'll call it sharing, whatever. where we're pooling the money together so that the kids on the poor side of town don't have a disadvantage over the kids on the rich side of town, because you got higher salaries for better teachers on the rich side of town. You got better computers, nicer place. You have air conditioning. And over on the poor side of the town, it's 100 degrees, and they're trying to learn out of outdated books with underqualified teachers, right? So there's an inherent, socioeconomic discrepancy that would, in fact, happen, that the public schools were designed to prevent and alleviate. When the money follows the student, how does that work?
Yeah, look, you described the status quo where there is inequality in the government-run school system. In fact, in my school district, right next door I live in San Antonio, there's a school district called Alamo Heights Independent School District, and they actually charge tuition for students who don't live in their district as a public school. So there's inequality rife in the current system. We talked about Baltimore and Chicago doing horribly earlier. School choice actually remedies those inequalities by giving more families access to educational opportunities. You have $10,000 or so follow the child. Guess what? Now more families can access private schools, other public schools, make it more economically feasible to homeschool too. It's not a perfect solution, don't get me wrong, but it is a step in the right direction towards more of a free market, more competition, more incentives being aligned in the right way, so that the system feels like they need to listen to the needs of parents and students as opposed to the other way around. But it also provides for more equality of opportunity.
So you're saying that each kid would be valued the same,
Yep.
and not according to what the community or the state or the individual taxes are being paid or whatever, that go towards it. You kind of, aren't you really restructuring the whole financial system of education once you start doing that? Not that I'm opposed to it, but I mean, is that
in a sense, but the funding would still be the same. I'm not making an argument about how much we should spend on K through 12 education. All I'm saying is that if we're going to spend the money, it should go to people, not buildings. We should fund students, not systems. Just like we do. Look, Democrats support higher education vouchers when it comes to Pell Grants. When you have a Pell Grant, we don't say you got to spend that at the community college. No, the students can choose where they go to college.
That's true.
And I'm not saying that Pell Grants are good or bad. I'm just saying if we're going to spend that money, it should follow the decision of the kid.
Yeah.
Same thing with pre-K. With pre-K programs, Democrats support this all the time. You don't have to take it to a government-run pre-K. You can go to any pre-K provider you want, even a religious provider if you want. Same thing with food stamps. Does the food stamp have to go to a government-run grocery store that you're assigned to? No way. It follows the decision of the family. You can use Medicaid vouchers for hospitals that happen to be religiously affiliated if you want. The funding follows the individual decision. And I'm not arguing any of these other programs are good or bad. I'm just saying if we're going to spend the money, it should go to people as opposed to institutions. And so that's the logic of school choice. And why do people have a disconnect there? Why do Democrats oppose school choice? Money following the child? It's all about the teachers unions. It's a money laundering operation. It ought to be illegal. 99% of Randy Weingarten's campaign contributions from AFT go to Democrats each year.
Yeah, well,
that's why we see
it. There are some Republicans that are a problem too in this area.
Look, our home state of Texas. But look, the teachers union candidates lost on Super Tuesday and in May. There were 21 so-called Republicans in Texas who voted with all the Democrats against their own party platform issue of school choice. A bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it works out for them. It didn't work out for them.
No.
14 of them are gone, and incumbents usually win 95% of the time. The voters held them accountable, and even out of the 7 who remain, 2 of them already signed on to a pledge to support school choice. Funny how that works.
Well, and if I remember correctly, a couple of them that did win barely won. So,
exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Good. They're listening now. Okay. So another question when it comes to that type of system. One, is there a danger if you start having government money attached to a student and they start going to a Christian institution that the government come in and say, okay, you can't teach that anymore? We've seen them try to control the content.
Yeah, I've never seen a private school choice program where they've said that you have to change your curriculum. You have to teach CRT or gender, right? I've never seen that happen. We've had decades of school choice expansions over time in over 30 states. And at the end of the day, we don't want to make perfect the enemy of the good. If we don't take the W, we're going to be stuck with the L. Because look, people might say with government shekels comes government shackles.
Right.
But the reality is the shackles can come without the shekels. You might as well take the money and have the choice to do so. It's all voluntary. No one is forced to take the funding. And guess what? States that have more school choice tend to have better homeschooling laws in terms of more freedom. You look at places like Iowa and Oklahoma, they have universal school choice. At the same time, they have the best homeschooling laws in the nation as far as homeschool freedom. You look at states like New York and Rhode Island and Massachusetts, no school choice, but they have the worst homeschooling laws on the books. When you have the money following the child, if anything, it should reduce the likelihood of regulation because you build a broader tent, a bigger coalition. And politics, as we all know, is all about organized interests for pushing for what they want. The unions do this all the time. When we have school choice, we build that coalition stronger to fight against government overreach in the future.
You've mentioned the unions, and I know, I mean, my wife was an elementary school teacher for a very short time because we started having kids fast. But I known a lot of teachers. And the number one complaint I think I've heard over the many, many years is that when we get more money, you might have a city or a district-wide referendum. They're like, they don't hire more teachers, they hire more administrators.
Exactly.
Are the unions and the administrators, granted, you need some administration, I'm not saying you don't, but is there just corruption between the unions and the administrators that creates a divide between the teachers that actually deal with the kids on a regular basis?
Exactly. And in Texas, in our home state, there's a handful of superintendents who make more than Joe Biden, more than $400,000 a year. It's insane how much. And Randy Weingarten, she makes over $500,000 a year. And when the schools get more money, it doesn't go towards the classroom. It doesn't go towards the teachers. I mentioned earlier that since 1970, we've increased per student funding by 170% in real terms. Teacher salaries have only gone up by about 10% since 1970. Even after adjusting for inflation. So where's all the money going? Well, we do have data since 2000. And since 2000, the number of students and teachers in the system have each increased by only about 7%. But the number of administrators in the system, they've increased by about 90%.
Jeez.
It's become more of a jobs program for administrators than an education initiative for kids. And choice helps teachers too, because it gives their employer a monopoly, an incentive to do a better job, spend the money wisely on the teachers doing a good job.
Yeah, well, okay, so and that's one of the things about school choice that I would think it just makes sense that you're going to cut out unnecessary administration and you're going to reward better teachers who do a better job, which is measured by the results you get in your students. They would be better off financially, most likely, wouldn't they?
Exactly. And look, the Washington Post, which is a trash newspaper for a lot of reasons, broken clock is right twice a day. During the COVID era, they actually wrote a story about a New Jersey public school teacher of all places who had left the government school system after being in it for decades. They started a micro school, only about 5 to 10 children. They were earning the same amount of money, a fraction of the class size, and they had a lot more autonomy. They didn't have to deal with all the bureaucratic red tape in the government school system. If the money followed the child, they could make even more money than they were in this story. The Washington Post didn't take the next logical leap and say this is why we should have school choice. But you got to give them credit that they at least covered the story.
Well, they might have accidentally said something true. And the other thing I hear from homeschoolers, and because there's a lot of great curriculums out there for homeschool where they coordinate with other homes and they get the socialization. Sometimes they pool resources and things like that. So there's actually a lot out there if you're in the middle of that wondering if there's some solutions out there. There are. What I hear is that, we cover more in 3 hours than they cover all day in a public school easily, which leaves time to do maybe some more hands-on field trips or to increase your actual curriculum to cut out the nonsense that you don't want to spend time on or you object to for political or religious reasons, and really focus on the core, and the kids come out smarter. This is going to sweep. It has to sweep at least a portion of the nation, and I think what you're seeing is it is.
It already is. Yeah, if you look relative to pre-pandemic levels, homeschooling has at least doubled since 2019. That is such a huge seismic shift in people homeschooling. Why do you think they did that? Well, they got a taste of homeschooling in some way when the government schools closed. And a lot of families, some families weren't able to figure it out, but a lot of families who weren't even going to try homeschooling got to test the waters. And a lot of them found out they can learn more at a fraction of the time. And then their kids are less anxious. They're getting positive forms of socialization where they can kind of control the environment as opposed to the government socialization. Have you seen society? The public schools might have something to do with a lot of the polarization we see in society today.
Yeah.
I mean, the negative forms of socialization in the government schools, that's a huge problem. I mean, even when I went to public schools in Texas growing up in middle school, there were people fighting, there were drugs, there was gang activity. And I cover a little bit of my experience in the school system as well in my book, The Parent Revolution, Rescuing Your Kids from the Radicals Ruining Our Schools. But homeschooling allows you to cut out the negative forms of socialization while finding and capitalizing on positive forms of socialization. More parents are figuring that out, and that's why the unions are so terrified right now.
Yeah, and they're going to demonize. All right, I'm going to show you guys a couple of resources real quick. This is federationforchildren.org, federationforchildren.org, because my last real kind of question for you, Corey, is for those people who are watching this going, okay, I want to change, I want to do better, whatever reason they're watching this to the end, where do they go next? How do they get involved? How do they spark this in their community, or at least just take care of it for their kids? What do parents need to actually go do?
Yeah, if you're in one of the 12 states that already have universal school choice, which they're all red states, including Arizona, Florida, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Iowa. And you can look on my Twitter for the full list of states, or you can go to federationforchildren.org to look at the full list of states as well. But if you're not in a state that's already doing that, you either need to lock arms with other parents, create groups in your communities to become a political force to be reckoned with. You need to tell your legislators that they should support universal school choice. So if you're in a state like Tennessee, that's pretty close to getting there. I think they have the votes, but you got to pressure the legislators and tell them, this is what I want. I want my taxpayer dollars to follow me to the school that best meets my needs and aligns with my values. So that's one of the best things you could do to pressure your elected officials to do the right thing. They need to hear from you guys. You can also follow me on Twitter, now X. It's at DeAngelis Corey. I provide updates every single day on what's happening on the school choice front. And so if you're paying attention to what's happening in your state, I will be talking about that if something is introduced or passed. And then you could also get a copy of The Parent Revolution, Rescuing Your Kids from the Radicals Ruining Our Schools. It's available on Amazon. I believe it's 25% off right now. And it was recently endorsed by President Trump, and it's now a national bestseller. So I'm honored to have his endorsement.
Well, congratulations on that. That's a great accomplishment. But thank you even more just for the work you're doing and moving the needle politically and informing parents, because a lot of them just don't know what to do, and they know that the current thing isn't working, and they love their kids.
That's right.
So thank you. Anything you want to add before I let you go?
That's it. Yeah. Thank you so much for the opportunity to discuss The Parent Revolution, Rescuing Your Kids from the Radicals Ruining Our Schools. And look, you guys should be optimistic. We're winning this war that the unions have waged on our kids for far too long, and they are running scared right now.
Yeah. And one thing you can do, by the way, right now to advance the very cause we've been talking about, hit that share button. Everybody that's got kids in school, be like, you need to watch this. There's something we can do. We can start something, and we can change this. Appreciate you guys being here. If you haven't liked, follow, subscribe, please do that. I'll see you again next time. In the meantime, go get The Parent Revolution.